Oh, we don't make mistakes. A post by another user reminded me of a story my mother told me about what happened to her when she visited France once upon a time. It's 1974 and my recently graduated mother is visiting France on vacation. She's at the bank exchanging money, and upon exiting the bank and counting the money, she realizes they've given her $80 too much. She likely received it in francs, but however much she received, it was equivalent to $80 US dollars. In 1974, when adjusted for modern day, that's equivalent to around $445. My mom ran off cackling into the night with her newfound fortune, realized that an error had been made, and being the well-behaved person she was, turned round, went back into the bank, got back online for the teller, and tried to explain to the teller that a mistake had been made and give the money back. The teller's response? Teller: "Oh no. We don't make mistakes." A bit stunned, my mom ran off cackling into the night with her newfound fortune, walked out of the bank, and stood around for a few minutes wondering what she should do. No, she decides. The teller had clearly misunderstood her and it wasn't right for her to keep the money. A second time she turns around and goes back into the bank. This time, instead of the tellers, she goes to one of the people behind the desks. She couldn't remember it was a manager, but we're going to pretend it was. Once again she tries to explain to the manager that a mistake was made. The manager's response? Manager: "Oh no. We don't make mistakes." Stunned yet again, my mom ran off cackling into the night with her newfound fortune, decided that she had done enough to try and right this mistake, and accepted her newfound fortune. However, most definitely did not run off cackling into the night, since she was now significantly more worried about getting mugged and/or arrested, and did not want to draw attention to herself. Spoilers. Her trip ended just fine and nothing bad happened because of this. Now it's easy to look at this situation and laugh at how stubborn the bank was, but my family has always wondered whether or not the employees at the bank actually did understand what my mom was trying to tell them, but to them it was not worth the money to admit they had made a mistake. TLDR. Mom draws the best Monopoly community chest card and tries to give it back twice. I once heard of a similar situation involving a wedding dress. Bride gets the dress and uses card to pay for it. Checks card charges a day later, but doesn't see the dress seller on the list. She figures that it'll take a bit for this super expensive dress to clear. So she waits and waits and waits. No charge. So she calls the seller, and the second she mentions the dress price, they go off on her about all sales are final and should have checked the price tag, while clearly not listening to her explanations of, "I'm trying to pay you." Eventually, she gave up and enjoyed her free wedding dress. My husband and I rented a car in France and made arrangements to drop it off in Le Havre and take a train to Paris. We could not find the rental car place. Apparently they had moved. With the help of a local, we found the place 10 minutes before the train's departure. So I went in ranting at them in my pretty decent French. They asked to see the written agreement, and the change of address was clearly there and even highlighted. I turned to my unilingual husband and said, "It's our fault. We're fucked. Is your luggage still in the car?" "Yes. We can make it." This lady drove like a maniac and we dove headfirst onto the train as it was pulling out of the station. Lessons learned: 1. Own up to your mistake. 2. Everyone understands, we're fucked. 3. It helps if you try to speak the language. This happened to the father of a friend of mine. He was in France and wanted a souvenir to take back to his daughter. He found a pair of erasers in 2 sizes. The small one had on it in English, for small mistakes, and the large one had on it, also in English, for large mistakes. He thought these were a great gift, but wanted to have the words in French as they were to be a souvenir of his trip to France. He could only find a small eraser with the words in French. After a fruitless search for a large eraser with the phrase in French, he went up to a salesperson and explained what he wanted. Her reply? "I am sorry, monsieur, but you won't find it in French. It is only the English who make large mistakes." I loved the running gag about her running off cackling into the night. When I was around 11 to 13 years old, I had a bank account which I barely used. I put some money in from babysitting and noticed an additional $4,300 in my account. I didn't know what to do, so I left it and it was removed a few days later. Banks do make mistakes. I think banks truly feel they are infallible. Back around the same time frame, my parents found that an extra $25 had been deposited into their checking account. "We don't make mistakes," they were told. "But, for a $5 fee, we will investigate it for you." No thanks. Many years ago I ran a tontine. On December 1st I went into the bank, had a nice chat with the clerk and walked away with my money, which was a few £1,000. Up in my office, I counted out the money, double-checked it and found it was £60 over. Not a massive amount, but it confused the life out of because I knew my maths were correct. And everyone had an envelope with the correct amount of cash in it. But still, here I was with too much money. One of the ladies came down to collect her money and I explained to her about the extra money. We checked it together and it was definitely £60 over. So back to the bank I went with the extra money. Back to the same clerk and explained my position. "I've triple-checked and I have too much money." Which can only mean you are down money, because if you aren't, I have no idea where this money came from. She immediately closed her desk and started counting up her drawer and entering amounts onto the computer. She suddenly looked up at me and smiled, swung her monitor around for me to see, and there it was, minus £60. She was so polite when I went back. No comments about not making mistakes. Nothing. She fully accepted there may have been a mistake and was happy to check for me. In 1964, my mother had 4 children age 4 or young. She took us all home after withdrawing cash at the bank. After nap time, she checked the withdrawal only to find it was $70 over. That's about $600 in current dollars. She packed us all back into the car, back to the bank. The teller told her that my mom had to be mistaken, that her drawer count was perfect. Go home. Don't ask questions. My mom took us all home and didn't ask questions. She did buy new curtains for the house. It can be quite difficult for some people to admit that they are wrong. Especially to admit to an American that they are wrong. This may be even more difficult if you come from a country whose name rhymes with trans. Whenever I hear about these kinds of mistakes by bank tellers or other cash drawer employees, I wonder if there is a certain amount of red tape avoidance psychology going on. Like maybe, in order for the teller to correct the mistake, she would first have to admit that a mistake was made by her, raising a big red flag with her boss. If a cash drawer is short and is within acceptable limits, it is probably not worth company time to investigate. But if we can identify the specific transaction where the mistake was made, maybe it makes sense to the powers that be to more closely scrutinize that. And the employee gets dinged more heavily for that specific, identifiable mistake in a specific, identifiable transaction. Whereas if we assume it is a series of small mistakes over the course of a whole shift, might not be considered as bad. I know it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I can see bank boss logic doing something along these lines. Long ago, when you had to go into the bank to write and cash a check and talk to a real person, my mom was given an extra $100. Just before the holidays, she went into the bank and requested several $100s. They were new bills and the teller dutifully counted out the amount. Mom's sharp eyes somehow caught the extra thickness of a bill. She politely asked for a recount. The teller sighed and recounted, getting the same. Mom stepped out of line and rubbed the bills together, revealing an extra $100. She then summoned the manager and explained the mistake. The teller was so relieved and grateful as her till would have been short. Mom was a big believer of karma. It never, ever occurred to her to keep the dollar. We were an internet startup in the early 2000s. We get our first check from a customer. It's over $1,239. We are in the bank depositing and goofing on getting a toaster or the blender or the beach chairs. Teller plays along. We got all three. Yay us. 3 days later, the manager sees me on the street and snatches me in the store. They processed it for $100 million and needed to fix it. No problem. I signed off. But the staff was relieved that it wasn't a big deal. Years ago, I went through the drive-thru to try and make the daily deposit plus change order for the fast food joint I manage. The cashier gave me my receipt, change order, and full daily deposit back. I pulled out what I needed from the tube dispenser thing and sent the deposit back a second time. The cashier asked me what I needed through the intercom and I kind of lackadaisically replied something along the lines of she might want to count everything again. She switched off, did whatever it was she was meant to be doing, and sent the bag back to me. I sent it back again, and again a fourth time. By this time, she's extremely annoyed with me. I'm bemused but have already been gone from my store for almost an entire half hour for a simple deposit at the bank at the end of the block from the restaurant. After the third go-around, she very sarcastically asked me if I would like to just park my car and come inside and someone else would figure out what my problem was. I buzzed her back, looked dead at her across the other lanes and informed her that I was trying to help her and that if she really wanted me to come inside and witness her being fired for being over $3,000 short in her drawer and being a snotty bitch to boot, that would be just fine with me. I watched her open her mouth to respond and then the moment of clarity came across her now blood-drained face. Then I got about 10 solid minutes of blubbered apologies in her non-work voice. A similar story I heard was a customer goes in a bank to withdraw $100 in 20s. The clerk gave him 5 $100 bills. He says to the clerk, "I think you made a mistake." She replied, "Like the above story, we don't make mistakes," so he left. The next day, he goes back to the bank and talks to a manager and explains the event. I don't remember the fallout, but couldn't have been good for the clerk. Something similar happened to my mom. Her Amex card was compromised, and the bad guys charged about $5,000 on the card. My mom contacted Amex, and they canceled everything off of that billing cycle, including about $3,000 of legitimate charges. My mom thought it might be a glitch that would work itself out by the next billing cycle. But it didn't, so she called Amex to let them know that she owed them $3,000. The Amex agent was super snotty. "Ma'am, that case is closed." This wasn't the agent giving my mom a wink and a nod to accept Amex's oversight, the agent was super annoyed at my mother. So my mom cackled and ran off into the night to enjoy her good fortune. If they don't make mistakes, was everything I learned in Monopoly a lie? I'm confused. You start the story out in 1974. Then tell us the mistake was in 1984. When did the time travel happen? I had something similar happen where a woman at a bakery gave me my change. Went to go get something in the back. Then proceeded to give me my change again. I tried to stop her by telling her she already gave me my change. And she almost told me off with something like, "I think I'd know if I already gave you change." I forget the exact value, but I think I made €5 on that transaction and got like €12 worth of stuff. When I was an auditor with my state tax commission, we would regularly receive information from IRS for use in our audits. At one point in time, I received 11 information packets showing the taxpayer as having a filing status of 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10. At the time, IRS only used status with numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. I saved the documents, and when IRS sent a representative for our quarterly, need and use, audit, I presented them to her with the question, "What filing status are these?" Quote. A bit of backstory at this point. Earlier that day we had been required to sit through a presentation from IRS about how their new data control system resulted in a guaranteed 100% of all data. As the IRS person stated, "At the IRS we do not make mistakes." The person who said that was the same one who a few hours later I presented with my stack of clearly erroneous documents. Her response, "How dare you? After I tell you the service never makes mistakes. How dare you present with these examples of our mistakes?" Quote. Ladies and gentlemen, your tax dollars at work. I had started a new job, and due to the pay schedule, I didn't get a paycheck for the first month. So being extra broke, I went to deposit my first measly half of a paycheck that I had finally gotten. Later when I got home I checked my balance on the web and saw that there was an extra $2,000 plus in my account. The teller must have deposited the check of the person in line behind me into my account as well. The picture of the check even showed up on the website. Now, I knew the bank would correct this mistake, but I made the call that it was better to quickly pay up my past due bills and avoid various late fees and other penalties, using the logic that any overdraft fees incurred when they took the money back would be waived, because it was their mistake. Fortunately, they actually admitted the mistake and waived several late fees over the following month that cascaded from it.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Haircast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.